You know, guys, I have to go back a little bit, and I'll do it a little more calmly today, but I do have to go back to the Madison Square Garden, okay? A number of days are now removed, and people are pushing back heavily on the main event. And we knew that on Wednesday. We knew that we would. Let's not ever get lost in the message of congratulations to the ladies that got their opportunity and good for you for stepping up and doing it. But I do wish that we would get some backstory there on all the guys that didn't. And it's a very tough place in this sport. How are you going to do it? How are you going to herd these cats known as mixed martial arts fighters? And as much as you fans may enjoy them, have you met a lot of fighters, and did you leave there impressed? If we're to be honest with ourselves, are we? When you're dealing with some of these guys, things get to be very tough. When you treat them too well, things get to be very tough. And it appears that fighters right now are in a spot where they have been treated so well for so long that now they don't want to show up for work. We see that in all aspects. It's not just fighters. This is just a show, and we're talking about fighters. But we see that in all aspects. I mean, we saw that with the sale of the UFC. The UFC sold. Some guys got some big buyouts. They left the business. They don't want to go back to work anymore. There was people that were questioning, why does Dana White still want to go to work? You guys remember that narrative? Well, some guys want to and some guys don't. When you're in the promotion business, it's very important that you identify right off the bat who wants to do this job. And let me get behind those guys. And the other guys that want to turn the gun on me, let me get the hell away from them. And there used to be a time when there was less shows when you could do just that. Now there are so many shows, the promoter's starting to have to cave. Gustafsson came out today for his big fight with Jon Jones at the end of the year. World title fight. Welcome back, Jon. Right into a world championship against a guy you've already beat. First off, Jon stiffed him on Madison Square Garden. Why that dialogue isn't out there is beyond me. In the good old day, it would be. Now it's not. Secondly, he won't sign to fight Gus because he's not the champion anymore, so he doesn't get pay-per-view points. Jon's holding out. In the good old day, you move on. Jon, you're out. You try it again, I'll just cut you completely. Well, we're in a different spot now. If Jon keeps holding out, he'll get his points. Sure. The other way that you solve that is you just bring somebody else up. Anthony Smith will take that fight right now. I'll speak for him. Guaranteed. Take the fight right now. I know what you're thinking. Oh, it's not going to do as good a business. It's not yet. All the same. Get on with it. And get on with the guys that want to be here. The right guy always shows up. Always. There has never been an Olympic Games in history where they're putting a gold medal around a guy's neck and some dude turns to his friends in the living room and says, yeah, I could have won that. Literally, it's never happened. Yeah, I could have done that. I sat this Olympics out. Never. Never. Never has a Super Bowl been played and some guy turns to his buddy and says, man, I should have been in there. I think, you know what, I think I'm going to sign up next year. Doesn't work that way. You have a lot of guys with a lot of excuses. The bottom line, if the answer is no, you lose. It is not any different in the cage than it is on the playground. If one guy shows up and one guy doesn't, the other guy loses. For any reason. And he can offer, well, I would have won, and I just don't. He can offer anything he wants. Guys, you all came from the playground. You tell me, am I wrong? One guy shows up and one guy doesn't. Who's the class look at as the winner? It used to be this way in this sport. And now you wonder who's watching the shop. Who's in control here? There are guys who want to fight. Those are the guys that we want to see fight. We've got to start that narrative. Because if we start finding out that other guys don't, if we start finding out that Jon Jones does not love this sport, is not showing up because he wants to entertain the fans, is not motivated because a world championship is being offered and contested, if that isn't enough, and we find out he will only do it for money, then we got to get behind some other guys. And promoters don't love to do that. They love to go, yeah, but Jon Jones is the best fighter in the world. We got to have him. Well, do we? Do we? Because if I find out a guy doesn't want to do it, I don't want him forced in there. Sounds like ancient Greece to me. I don't like the sound of that. This is a combat sport. It's a rough and tumble sport, and the only reason I can enjoy it as a fan is because I know the guys agree to the rules and that they both want to do it. I would just simply find no entertainment in somebody being forced into this environment. And it's starting to feel like they're doing that these days by these guys saying, I don't want to do it unless, and I need X, Y, and Z. Some guys will call that good business. I call you being annoying. I call you taking up a spot on the roster. And I call you out for not answering the bell at 3 o'clock to meet out on the playground. It's the way that it used to be. And somehow we've got away from it. And there's so much dialogue out there about independent contractors versus employees. I don't know that I've got a foot in either pool of that. But boy, there are times that I wish they were employees. So that your boss could call you to the job site and you either do the job that you've agreed to do or you are fired. That is the way that it would work in the real world. And these guys are only asked to go to work a few times a year. My least favorite thing about this entire sport, you only get to do it 3 times a year. I grew up as a wrestler. I got 5 to 6 matches in every single week. Dual meet on Thursday night, tournament on Saturday. Get 30 matches in a month. Now you only get 3 matches a year. That's really hard. For me, that's hard. And for some other guys, they've been treated so well, they're not hungry anymore. Right? It comes down to financial issues. Some of them have been paid so much money, they don't have to fight. They don't have to go to work, so they don't go. It's a hard guy to get behind. For me, that's a hard guy to get behind. I don't really care what his skills are. If he doesn't want to be there, he's out. For me. The IFL. You guys remember the IFL? International Fight League. A lot of fun. I was a coach for them under Matt Lindland. I was his assistant. Matt was a head coach, and we got to travel around. We had teams together. It was teams taking on teams, and these guys really wanted to treat the fighters right. They looked at the industry and thought, you know what? These guys only get paid when they fight. We don't think that's fair. We're going to put these guys on weekly salaries. And it was small. It wasn't something that was going to change your life, but there was a real consistency to that. The fighters really appreciated it. It got them through. They knew when their fights were. They knew what the win and the show and the bonus for the team, and they had this whole structure in place. And every Friday at 5, boom, these guys would have checks. Anybody that was with the IFL. And what the IFL leadership quickly found is when the fights came around, the guys didn't show up. They were pulling out with more injuries and illnesses than any other fight promotion. And what the bosses found at the IFL as the stock began to tank was, we're treating these guys so good, but they don't appreciate it. They're not looking at us as a business where the athlete is the commodity. And if the athlete doesn't go to work, we now have no sellable commodity. But they kept our money that we sent them every Friday at 5. And they're under contract, which means next Friday at 5, that guy still gets a check. It created a huge, huge problem. And I'm all for people being treated very well. That isn't my message. I'm just offering you examples from the past where when you treated fighters too well, you couldn't get them to show up. And there's a balance there. What do you do? If fighters are going to have that mindset, and they're looking at this as a business, and I'm only going to work when I need to work, that is not going to be a great recipe for a long-term financial plan for the fighter because he has a very small window. And his phone is only going to ring so many times. Instead of a fighter saying no, which is what happens. Hey, do you want this fight? It's Madison Square Garden. It's a main event. No. I don't know how many people said no. I just know they said no. That would have been a very good opportunity to say, you're putting me up against it. What are we going to do financially? And you would have gotten an answer. It would have been a very good time to say, hey, I don't like that matchup. That's probably not going to go well for me, but I will certainly go out and do it because my boss just asked me to. But in exchange, boss, I need a pass, regardless of what happens. I need to know my next fight is a co-main or higher. Do we have a deal? Win or lose, I get to come back to the spotlight with a full training camp. What do you think? Those are the kinds of things that you say before you just say, no, it's not enough time. Boxers have been doing that for years. Mike Tyson used to never have a fight without having an automatic rematch clause in the contract should he get beat. I'm not saying to you that this is where our sport is going to go. I'm saying to you there are other avenues and other options if you truly do want to fight and you truly feel you're putting your career on the line at the wrong time in a bad matchup. There are other things that you can ask for to help to get a little bit of security so that you get to come back again. And I've always felt that the organizations, both Bellator and the UFC, are very good and fair at that. Sometimes it needs to be said, but generally you will get a yes. Just to, by example for you guys, if you have ever a short-minute fight, let's say you're not in the UFC at all, okay? You're not in Bellator at all, but you want to be. And you read on the internet, somebody pull out of a fight that's 5 days away. If you contact them and go, hey, I'll step in and do it, I'm your guy, they will reward you with what's called a 3-fight deal. If you go out there and fight and you lose, they will have you back, guaranteed 100%. Then they will tell you this up front, hey, you did us a favor, we're going to make sure that you get another opportunity. So it's very fair out there, but these opportunities don't come along that often. Joanna was very upset. She has a signed contract to take on Valentina down the road. I want to say December 8th. So they called her and said, we need to move the fight to November 3rd. We're moving it up a month. She said no. Now that opportunity's gone and she's very upset. I don't blame her for being upset. I do blame her for not following this sport. This is not unique. This is not a one-off. This has happened a million times. And it's very, very difficult. You can never come out as the promoter and as the leader of this industry and tell the fighters in no uncertain terms, we are not doing a sport here. We are putting on a television show and you are performers. You simply cannot do it. You would damage your product. You just sit back and hope to God on their own they figure it out. And when you're doing a television show, which is what they are doing, and allowing you to be a performer in it 3 times a year for as long as that career can last you, you can never forget rule number 1 of show business, which is the show must go on. So I do not blame Joanna at all. But when I saw her comments, I do blame her that she apparently has not followed this sport. And she was offended that she had to find out through journalists and through the media that they moved on with the show. And while that may sound heartless and cold, you must move on with the show. Offering her the fight that she had already agreed to against an opponent that she had already agreed to in the rules and the weight class and under the stipulations that she'd already agreed to, but to do it a month earlier is par for the course. That is the way that this business has worked for years, and it will continue to work that way. Because why it is being presented as a sport. Far and at the foremost of it all sits a television show. And if one actor or performer does not show up, the show is still going on.